The Divided Stories of America, The Green Forest, by J.C. Finnegan. The Bill of Rights. Number 1. Every person who wants employment has a right to employment. 2. Every person who wants a living wage has a right to a living wage. 3. Every person who wants housing has a right to housing. 4. Every person who wants food has a right to food. 5. Every person who wants clothing has a right to clothing. 6. Every person who wants medical care has a right to medical care. 7. Every person who wants an education has a right to an education. 8. Every person who wants Social Security has a right to Social Security. 9. Every person who wants to travel has a right to travel. Number 10. The aforementioned rights 1 through 9 are contingent on the person being in full compliance with any and all government mandates, and said rights are subject to revocation. Chapter 1. Spring Chicken and Easter Bunny. Own only what you can carry with you. No languages, no countries, no people. Let your memory be your travel bag. Alexander Solzhenitsyn. The grass is always greener in your mind's eye. With his mind open and his eyes closed, Finn inhaled and traveled back in time to the days of his childhood, the era of smiling faces, unified races, and a shared appreciation for truth and freedom. He exhaled and raised his eyelids, revealing the dilapidated stage and non-player characters that constituted his present reality. On this particular spring day in his 31st year, he found himself stuffed into a cramped subway carriage. The stress and tension were palpable in the constricted quarters. The fetid stench of his breath festered in his compliance mask as he surveyed the broken and beaten masses prostrated in front of their technocratic masters, their fingers twitching over beeping and whirring electronic devices. Their pie holes, hidden by their muzzles, were undoubtedly agape and craving pancakes and vapes. Technically alive but dead inside, they'd been propagandized to be blind to all but lies and incentivized to participate in a game that penalized speaking the truths men used to regard as self-evident. Finn and his Thai girlfriend, Thai, had agreed to venture out of the apartment for the weekend as a sort of New Year celebration. The Thai New Year, Songkran, fell in April. Finn had read that Songkran was a term derived from Sanskrit, meaning to move, and the idea of a spring New Year made a lot of sense. April was a time for movement. It was a time of new life, a time for spring chickens and Easter bunnies. Of course, there would be no Songkran ball drop and no countdown. That was fine by Finn. He hadn't seen the Times Square New Year's ball drop since his balls dropped. He'd lost count of how much time had passed since they lopped him off, figuratively. "You've got your passport and all your documents, right?" Finn asked. "Shy," replied Ty. "Yes." "Okay, good. They won't let you enter without them." "Next stop, 81st Street. Please clear the closing doors," came the announcement. "That's us. Let's go," said Finn. As they ascended the subway stairs, 3 homeless men impeded their path. 3 people without housing. 3 people experiencing a transition between housing structures. "Excuse me," Finn said, attempting to squeeze past them toward daylight. One of the men refused to budge, opting instead to scream something about freedom and liberty. It wasn't immediately clear whether his refusal to move stemmed from mere obstinance or some sort of disability, a different ability, a movement impairment. After clambering past the human obstacles, Finn turned to offer them some change. While reaching into his pocket, he scrutinized the men's faces. The most stubborn of the three had a golden egghead on which a colonial-era mullet of thick gray hair grew, beginning at the top of his dome and flowing to his broad shoulders. His face, complemented by a vintage Civil War beard, looked familiar, like one you'd find on old United States banknotes. "Mr. Hogan? Is that you?" Finn suspected that this pauper in tattered clothing was his high school history teacher. Aside from the thick facial hair which hid his dignified features, the man's physical appearance had changed little in the past 15 years. "We hold these truths to be self-evident," shouted Mr. Hogan, staring at Finn and rising to his sturdy legs, "that all men are created equal." "It's nice to see you, Mr. Hogan." Finn grabbed at a few dollar bills in his pocket. Despite the government's incessant promotion of the cryptocurrency GovCoin, U.S. dollars were still accepted at some establishments in the Northeast. Finn extended his arm and held out the money, displaying a willingness to ignore regional protocols regarding social distancing. "We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights," continued Mr. Hogan, now standing at the top of the concrete stairs with his index finger in the air. Finn shook Hogan's hand, transferring the money in the process. He then signaled to Ty, and they moved on. "That guy was the best teacher at the entire school," Finn said. "I remember him telling us the story of Santa Anna at the Battle of San Jacinto. He said that the Texans caught the Mexicans with their pants down. You should have seen Hogan walking around the classroom, pulling up his trousers, saying, 'Me no Alamo, me no Alamo.'" Finn took stilted steps as if his trousers were around his ankles. Classic. The last time Finn had come to the American Museum of Natural History was with his father. Of course, that was before the national divorce, before the divided states of America, before the founding fathers were run out of town by a nanny state, before there were 4 distinct regions with their own laws, their own customs, and their own governments. It was a simpler time back then, back when there was a United States of America, back when the statues of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson still stood tall. In those days, people used to say things like, "I'm proud to be an American." Walking down a tree-lined suburban street, a man would see hundreds of American flags, thousands even. They served as ubiquitous red, white, and blue symbols of freedom and liberty. On porches, in the hands of children, on walls adorning storefronts, on lapels. It wasn't only in City Hall and on Main Street that one could find these flags. Hell, you used to see them in Hollywood. Not anymore. The new regime had relegated the American flag to history's trash bin, insisting that it was a relic of a sinister past that people must never mention. "The last time I was here, dinosaurs still roamed the earth." Finn bent at the hips, put his arms inside the sleeves of his t-shirt, and did his best T-Rex impression. "Back then, they had the same stuff inside, but they called it the Natural Future Museum. Get it? My Kauchai, I don't understand." It was a long time ago. Finn continued to strut about like a T-Rex. He let out a screeching roar. "Bengala? You're a chicken?" Finn straightened himself and lowered his arms. "Chicken? No, I'm a T-Rex dinosaur." As they approached the museum, Finn looked at the list of requirements for entry. If he wanted to read the entire list, he would need 2 hours, a rocking chair, and a cup of tea. When he'd come here with his father during the bygone era, they would breeze through the door like diplomats. His father would greet the security guard with a wink and a nod. "Hey, Jimmy, this is my boy Finn." The security officer would reply, "Are you sure about that? This boy looks too handsome to be the son of an ugly SOB like you. Hey, I'm just breaking your balls. You two have a good time." The 2 men would share a hearty laugh. It was starkly different now. Outside the museum, the security guards' mouths were covered. Their hands gripped bottles of alcohol gel and guns, and none of them looked to be in the mood for banter. An iris scanner built on AI technology and based on a resident's biometric pattern awaited visitors inside the building. The scan would reveal a person's vaccination status, age, race, income, sexual orientation, gender identity, and government environmental social GES score. Despite the iris recognition system's omniscience, paper documents were still required, ostensibly for safety, but in actuality the papers served only one function: to make the entire experience more burdensome for all parties involved. The paper trail of tears. A GES score of 200 was needed for admittance into the museum. Regional businesses were afforded some discretion in establishing the GES conditions required for the acquisition of their services, with most places adhering to a similar protocol. Upon recognition of a person's biometric pattern, accomplished through an iris scan, an individual's score would appear on a device's screen accompanied by a flashing light. A green light indicated that the conditions were met, while a red light meant that the transaction had failed. Additionally, the number would appear on another screen, which was much larger and visible to bystanders. This second display functioned to publicly shame those with low scores and impel them to improve. Nobody wanted a scarlet letter. "What's your GES score, Ty?" "My Najai. I not sure." "Didn't you check at the subway station?" said Finn. "I did not see on screen. It disappeared quickly." "Well, what was it the last time you checked?" "I think 610. "Nice. You know you don't have to wear a mask on the subway, right? You only have to wear one if your score is below 500. Finn knew what Ty's response would be, but he couldn't resist the urge to encourage her to once again share her lovely face with the world. "I know, but I like to wear. I don't want virus." "Anyway, how does an unemployed foreigner have a higher score than a hard-working, natural-born citizen? You see?" Finn punched his left palm with his right fist. "That's what's wrong with this world." He shook his head in a display of mock disgust that could be interpreted as genuine by a person who didn't understand the role of sarcasm in his culture. Ty smacked him on his shoulder. At the museum's entrance, they encountered another line of security guards, showed the requisite paperwork, placed their bags on a metal detector conveyor belt, underwent a full body scan, endured a nasal swab, and were directed toward an iris recognition terminal. As Ty bounced toward the terminal, the cool draft produced from the opening and closing of the museum's automatic doors pushed her long, straight hair from side to side. She had a bunny nose and a slight overbite, which were usually veiled by a surgical mask. The skin of her forearms hadn't seen the sun in months, but it still retained its dark hue. The tan skin, coupled with her gold jewelry, combined to make her look like a goddess from the mythical city of El Dorado. She rarely turned down dessert, spent most of her days on the sofa, and yet her body remained lithe and firm. To touch her soft skin and kiss her full lips was to know the true power of the feminine energy. To hold her bikini-clad body while frolicking in the ocean, her wet skin glistening in the sun and jet-black hair clinging to her sleek shoulders, was to understand the beauty of the divine design behind the human female form during peak fecundity. Recently, the joy in her eyes had dimmed, and the effervescent spring in her step now came and went at random intervals. They had avoided the question of whether the flame within her heart had been extinguished during winter's hibernation, however. The answer to that enigma was obscured by both the literal mask she perpetually wore and the figurative mask we all wear. Ty stood facing a mounted device that resembled a large smartphone. Raising her heels off the ground, she peered into its screen. A light flashed green, followed by the appearance of a number on a giant overhead display. 645. A machine spoke. Your total payment is 60 GovCoin. 60 GovCoin has been deducted from your GovCoin account. Thank you. Excuse me, Finn said to his mirror image reflected in a security official's sunglasses. Can I pay with cash, please? He pulled out a wad of crumpled dollar bills. The guard put his hand on his gun. No, approach the iris scanner now. Knowing that the Northeast Central Committee, aka the Reptilians, relished the opportunity to collect data based on his spending habits, Finn made an effort to use GovCoin as infrequently as possible. The Northeast Central Committee was a group of bureaucrats, many of them nameless and faceless, who implemented and enforced policy in NESA. Owing in part to their cunning and deceitful nature, people had taken to calling them reptilians. There were rumors that the Northeast Central Committee was nothing more than a puppet regime of the Macro Globe Corporation, which was owned by the Pacific Region's chairperson Wanda. Since the reptilians had the power to levy fines and impose taxes at will, all without a person's authorization, any money in his GovCoin account was essentially theirs for the taking. When he received his paycheck, he would race to convert it to cash before the reptilians could suck all the funds from his wallet. In recent months, he'd been losing that race. Finn shuffled toward the iris scanner, stuffing dollar bills into his pocket as he moved his feet. It was all so dehumanizing. He had an eerie premonition that the reptilians were developing an anal scanner. He clenched his teeth and opened wide for his eye exam. A light flashed green and 3 digits appeared on the device's screen. 373. The number vanished like a puff of smoke. It was strange. The better his vision was, the worse he did on the eye exam. The machine spoke again. Your total payment is 120 GovCoin. 120 GovCoin has been deducted from your GovCoin account. Thank you. Finn rubbed his eyes with the back of his hand as they walked. Prices have really gone up lately. I remember back in the day my ticket cost $6, and my old man's ticket was, I think, $12? Finn scratched at the back of his head. Inflation, you know what I mean? Myru, I don't know. And the dual pricing system is for the birds. As a BIPOC, black indigenous person of color, Ty received a 50% discount on the price of admission. Isn't it crazy to think that Morgan Freeman would have to pay less than me? Who is Morgan Freeman? Not fee, free. He's the guy in Shawshank Redemption. Finn prepped for his Morgan Freeman impression. Get busy living or get busy dying. Milo, I don't know. Is it fair that I have to pay more than millionaires? I mean, I'm not some great man, some Harrison Bergeron that you need to burden with heavy chains and a hideous mask, he said, fully aware that Ty had no idea what he was talking about. Finn was indeed no Harrison Bergeron. He was an average man of average intelligence and average appearance. He was of average height, meaning that he was of average height when compared to males of his generation, of above average height when compared to all humans on Earth, and of below average height when compared to professional basketball players. The dual pricing system doesn't seem fair to me. I was raised to believe that all men are created equal, Finn explained. But by all men, I mean all people. He cleared his throat. Obviously. You sound like old man. That's high praise. Finn had been alive for 30-some years, but he often felt like he'd been around for longer than that. After the death of his father, Finn had drawn the task of sorting through many of the old man's belongings. One day, while flipping through an album of old photos, he stumbled upon a black and white photograph of his great-grandfather with his wife and children. His great-grandpa's lean frame, dark side-swept hair, large ears, and narrow nose were the carbon copy of the features Finn saw in the mirror every morning. It wasn't difficult for Finn to envision himself in the black and white photo, dressed in commoner's clothing, flanked by a dutiful wife, and surrounded by an Irish brood of offspring, the face of each family member expressing disappointment at their circumstances and Finn's inability to provide as a patriarch. Finn had spent the following days showing his friends the photo and insisting that he'd journeyed to the present from the past. Finn strutted into the main hall like a time-traveling chicken with its head cut off, uncertain whether it had traveled into some savage past or some dystopian future. At first glance, it appeared to be an era in which woolly mammoths were imprisoned by armed security guards and indigenous people were subjected to iris scans. The whole thing was paradoxical, like rap music at a retirement home, with each squeak of his sneakers attracting the attention of the security guards and each rustle of his rucksack drawing the stares of the tour guides. Finn and Ty entered the Hall of African Mammals. "Ty, do you think a rabbit is a mammal?" "My name Kratai, mean rabbit in Thai language." Finn let out a deep sigh and rolled his eyes. "Yes, I know that." They'd been together for years, and yet she still felt the need to remind him of her name. This was a clear indication of a healthy relationship. One of his early introductions to the Thai language had been Ty explaining to him that the word Thai was not the same as her nickname, Thai. She'd had a hula hoop around her waist as she elucidated the dissimilarity to the best of her ability, the hoop revolving round and round as her pelvis rocked back and forth and side to side. The hypnotic spinning of the hula hoop had put Finn in a trance, rendering him incapable of logic and reason. Putting aside his stupefied state, Ty's muddled explanation would have confounded even the most focused of students. They'd had more good times than bad in the early days. They'd been in love, or at least something resembling love. Back in Thailand, they used to do the stereotypical things people in love do, holding hands and laughing. Day by day, they'd inched closer and closer to each other, incrementally opening their respective hearts. The chemistry between them tangible. Finn had told Ty she looked like a golden goddess from the ancient stories. Ty had told Finn that his green eyes looked like those of a Hollywood actor. What happened? It was as if they woke up in an empty movie theater to discover the credits rolling on the big screen, signaling that the fantasy was over. How do you say mammal in Thai language? Sat liang luk doi nom. Animal that raises the child with milk? Yes. Finn patted Ty's flat stomach. "I've heard that rabbits have a lot of babies. What about you? Do you raise any babies with milk?" Me. No, I don't." "No babies, I see." Finn rubbed his chin. "Do you at least have milk?" "Have, but very small." She giggled. Finn got a kick out of the fact that the Thais used the same word for milk and breast. If historically babies were the only humans that drank milk in Thai culture, this lack of distinction would make perfect sense. "Hey, give the baby some boob" makes more sense than "I went to 7-Eleven to buy some boob." During his stay in Thailand, there had been a baby girl attached to Ty's hip. At the time, the baby's mother, Ty's older sister, was working at a hotel in Bangkok. Ty called the baby daughter, but so did everybody else in the village. Finn had lived with Ty and her family for more than 2 years near a rice farm in rural Isan, the northeast region of Thailand. During that period, he'd spent the majority of his days online, trying to eke out a living in any way he could. The property was home to 6 chickens, a 3-legged dog, a one-eyed cat, and a buffalo. Besides the animals, the quaint abode housed dozens of people, parents, uncles, aunts, brothers, sisters, cousins, grandparents, and so on. The family filled their days napping and ambling about the property, the men shirtless and shoeless, the women cooking and cleaning, and all of them smiling and bowing to Finn as they passed. Initially, Finn had struggled to keep track of all of them, and he couldn't understand a damn word they said. In Finn and Ty's courtship days, he'd stuck out like a potato on a rice farm. Not knowing the language had made him feel weak and helpless, like he was missing one of his senses. He'd studied Thai not out of a love for the language, not out of a thirst for knowledge or an appreciation of the culture, but out of a sense of pride. One day, while they were sitting on the floor eating rice, an uncle said something while gesturing toward Finn. Apparently, it was a hilarious little anecdote because the entire room erupted in uproarious laughter, except for Finn, of course, who could only sit there perplexed. He'd spent the following months devouring books and videos, trying to piece together the puzzle that was this mysterious Asian language. Over time, he learned to recognize a few of the uncle's favorite words in Thai: drunk, pointy nose, monkey. Despite his progress with listening comprehension, his early efforts to speak Thai language with his girlfriend had been met with derision. She'd claimed she couldn't understand him, but Finn was skeptical. When he would ask what he was doing wrong, she provided no feedback. He'd suspected she wanted to keep him ignorant, enabling the family to continue to poke fun at him to his face with impunity. In those days, when Finn had attempted to speak Thai with her, she would invariably respond in English. "Come on! Speak Thai with me! I need to practice. Let's only speak Thai for an entire day, okay?" "Cannot. You cannot speak. I feel annoyed." No thanks to Thai, Finn's Thai language skills gradually improved. He would devote some time each day to practicing with a kindly grandma or a friendly nephew. Usually they would simply smile blissfully at him and nod, casting doubt on how much they understood. Even as he progressed, Finn found it difficult to truly express himself in the foreign language. There were only so many times he could talk to the grandma about spicy food. There were only so many times he could talk to the nephew about the hot weather. And when Finn attempted to discuss substantive issues or abstract concepts, he was told that he think too much. Frustrated with his inability to communicate deeply in the mostly monosyllabic tonal language, he grew bored with it, like a child who loses interest in a Christmas gift and throws it into the closet, never to be seen or heard from again. He preferred English, as its rich lexicon and expansive literary history provided a more appropriate medium for the expression of his ideas. Following their journey to New York, there shouldn't have been much use for Thai language, but for some reason, upon arriving in America, his girlfriend developed a habit of speaking more Thai with Finn and less English. It seemed counterintuitive. Her decision to speak Thai in New York must have been born not out of necessity, but rather out of choice. Over time, the significance of the communication barrier was overshadowed by a larger issue: the ever-widening chasm that existed between Thai's core values of safety and harmony, and Finn's core values of freedom and truth.